My toxic sister crashed my wedding, claiming my kids didn't count because they were born before marriage. What she did next was so outrageous. The police had to get involved. So a week ago, I, a 24-year-old woman, got married. And unfortunately, things went completely off course. Let me take you back to the start of this whole story. I have an older sister named Chloe, who's 26, and the rivalry between us has been intense since we were kids. I'm not exaggerating when I say it was constant. We absolutely hated each other while growing up, always competing, always trying to one-up each other. We could never get along. And even as we grew older, the animosity didn't fade. It only grew stronger. We did our best to keep it hidden from others, but everyone could feel the tension between us. We didn't speak to each other when we lived under the same roof, and we only pretended to get along when we were around our family. Our parents knew there was friction, but they didn't try to intervene or fix things. It's probably part of the reason things ended up going wrong, but I'll explain that more later. When Chloe turned 18, she moved out for college, and honestly, I was relieved. It was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. And for the first time, I could be myself at home without constantly walking on eggshells around her. She only came back for the holidays, and every time, she'd brag about how well her life was going. She was at one of the top business schools in the state, and while I'll admit there was a bit of jealousy, it also fueled my determination to prove myself. I worked harder than her to get into an even better school, which I did, and I got into an Ivy League school. That felt like a massive win for me, and it was celebrated much bigger than anything she'd ever been recognized for. I thought getting into an Ivy League school would finally end our constant competition, but I was wrong. One day, Chloe came to me and casually announced that she was starting her own business, with some help from our dad. She actually made it happen. Now, I don't know if it was just luck or pure hard work, but her business started to take off. A couple of years ago, she moved to Japan to expand the tech side of her company, and her success was undeniable. Our parents were so proud of her, and I could tell it ate me up inside. For me, things weren't going quite as smoothly. After graduating from college, I managed to find a job, but it wasn't anywhere near as glamorous or fulfilling as what Chloe was doing. I quit that job, and looking back, that was one of the biggest mistakes I made. I should have stuck it out, worked my way up, but instead, I let the competition with Chloe dictate my choices. I should have been focusing on myself and my career, but instead, I made everything about her and what she was accomplishing. After quitting, I waited around for something better to come along, but nothing did. That period of waiting turned into a dark phase. I started to feel depressed, watching as Chloe flourished in her career while I was stuck. My parents kept bragging about her, and I hated that I couldn't express how hurt I was. I was frustrated with myself, with the way things were turning out, and it was hard to hide that. I had to pretend to be happy for Chloe every time I saw my family, even though I wasn't. It just felt like everything I had done was meaningless next to her success. That was when I met Ethan. He completely changed my life. I'm so glad I met him because at that time, I really needed something or someone to pull me out of the rut I was in. It had been 6 months since I quit my job, and I was feeling lost. I wasn't actively looking for a relationship, but I decided to download a dating app, hoping it would distract me from everything. I wasn't expecting anything serious. I was just looking to escape my own thoughts, even if it was for a little while. I had no idea just how much this would change things. I was struggling to cover rent and buy basic necessities. My parents were sending me money every month to help, and I hated having to depend on them. It was embarrassing. I promised them I would pay them back as soon as I could, but I felt like such a disappointment. I knew I wasn't doing my best, and every month when I asked for help, I could hear the disappointment in their voices. That's when I turned to dating apps, hoping for a temporary distraction. I went on a few dates with guys who just wanted casual encounters, which was fine by me at the time, but then I matched with Ethan. He was genuinely interesting and had everything I needed. He was funny, charming, and just the right amount of masculine. What really stood out was his background. He had been a straight-A student in school, but after high school, he chose to go to culinary school, something that really impressed me. When he first reached out, he was honest about wanting something serious. He wasn't interested in a casual fling, and I liked that about him. It made me want to take the chance, so I agreed to go out with him. We went on our first date after talking for about 2 weeks online, and I can honestly say it was one of the best dates I've ever had. It felt like we'd known each other for years, and we had so much fun together. We clicked immediately. I wasn't expecting it, but it turned out to be the beginning of something truly amazing. I really felt like I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. And it was the first time I'd experienced that. It was such a nice change of pace from the constant pressure I usually felt around others. The conversation with Ethan was so easy and we just clicked. I'm not sure exactly what changed, but at some point I decided to give our relationship a real chance. We went on a few more dates, and after 3 months I found out that I was pregnant. The only thing I was worried about at the time was how Ethan would react, and nothing else. By that point, he already knew everything about me, my family, my history, the sibling rivalry I had spent my entire life enduring, all the things I had struggled with. But being with him made me want to be a better version of myself, one that didn't need to compete with anyone else. He was one of the reasons I had snapped out of my depression, and when I did, I started looking for work again instead of just waiting for an opportunity to fall into my lap. I even went back to my old job at the company I had quit. That decision turned out to be one of the best I had made in a while. When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't have much to worry about. By then, I had been working again for a month, and things with Ethan were going well. The only thing I was concerned about was how he would react. People usually assume it's too soon, and many would back out of the relationship out of fear, but deep down I felt ready to be a mother, and I couldn't explain it any other way. It just felt right. To my surprise, when I told Ethan about the pregnancy, he was incredibly supportive. He told me it was my body, my choice, and he would stick with me no matter what I decided. When I told him I wanted to keep the baby, he was overjoyed. He even admitted that he had hoped I would choose to keep the baby because he felt ready too. Even though we had only been together for 3 months, he didn't want to sound crazy, so he had left the decision up to me. But my choice made him the happiest man alive. We agreed that, even though we were having a baby, we would wait to get to know each other even better before making the commitment to marriage. We decided to go through with the pregnancy, and a few weeks later we discovered we were having twins, another huge surprise, but we were ready for it. He moved in with me shortly after we found out about the pregnancy, and he also introduced me to his parents, who were incredibly sweet and welcoming. His family was a lot different from mine. They didn't push anyone to compete with each other. They just loved and supported each other. It was the first time I had ever witnessed that kind of dynamic, and it made me realize how healthy their family was compared to mine. I was hesitant about introducing Ethan to my family, though I knew they wouldn't approve of my life choices. I was supposed to be a bright student with a promising future, and here I was having children with a man I had barely known for less than a year and already living with him. Any parent would disapprove of that, and I was certain my parents would have a meltdown, so I kept putting it off until I started showing. At 4 months along, I knew it was time to tell them, so I arranged a meeting and Ethan came along for moral support. When I told my parents about the pregnancy, I expected them to be angry or upset, maybe even yell at me, but their reaction was completely unexpected. They seemed genuinely happy for me. They hugged me, congratulated me, and when I told them I was having twins, my mother nearly fainted from happiness. It was such a relief, and I was glad they weren't mad at me. In fact, they threw me a party to announce that they were going to be grandparents. I also explained to them that Ethan and I didn't want to get married just because we were having kids together. We wanted to live together for a while before making that big commitment, and they were completely fine with that too. They were so supportive, and I was honestly shocked by how understanding they were. It was the kind of support I had never expected from them, and it felt good to finally be on the same page. We had a conversation afterward, and I told them how surprised I was by their reaction. They explained that they had realized, looking back, that they hadn't been the best parents in some ways. They hadn't intervened when Chloe and I were constantly trying to outdo each other, thinking they were just pushing us to do better. But they now understood that their actions had likely contributed to the unhealthy competition between us. They were aware that my decision to quit my job and try to do something more had been influenced by Chloe's success, and they admitted that they might have contributed to that pressure. They told me they wanted me to know that I didn't need to keep competing with Chloe to earn their love. They would always love me, just as much as they loved Chloe. And they were proud of both of us for always doing our best. It was a much-needed conversation, and I'm really glad I had the chance to talk things through with them. The pregnancy was a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and moments of unexpected support from my family, particularly my parents. They had been there for me every step of the way, and having them around made things easier. They offered their help without hesitation, allowing me to focus on getting through each day. Knowing that I could rely on them to take care of the kids while Ethan and I were busy with work, it was a relief not to have to juggle everything on my own, especially when things were so overwhelming. I remember my parents mentioning that they had a similar conversation with Chloe, but unfortunately, it hadn't gone quite as well as they had hoped. They had tried to approach her with the same care, the same understanding that they had shown me, but Chloe had responded in a way that made it clear she wasn't open to the same kind of support. According to my parents, she had laughed it off when they told her they were proud of both of us and that they just wanted her to ease up and stop putting so much pressure on me, but instead of listening, she had brushed them off, convinced that I was only struggling because I was a sore loser. That's how she saw it. She thought my breakdowns were a sign of weakness, something she believed I deserved because in her mind, I hadn't done things the right way. She had always been quick to judge, to categorize everything based on her version of success. To her, I was failing because I had gotten pregnant out of wedlock, and to her that was a failure no matter how much love I had for Ethan or how much we were trying to make things work. She refused to acknowledge that our parents were trying to be better, to be more supportive and understanding. In her eyes, they had no right to feel that way about me because, as far as she was concerned, she was the one who deserved their love. After all, she was the one who had it all together. According to her standards, she was living a life that seemed more polished, more successful than mine, and that meant she had earned all of their attention and affection. I was just an afterthought in her eyes, someone who had to constantly fight to be seen for who I really was. My parents told me they were going to talk to Chloe again, but they said it would have to be in person. When she came home for the holidays, they said that online communication just wasn't the same. It didn't have the same impact and things got lost in translation. They promised that they would talk to her about what had been going on, about how she had been trying to compete with me and make me feel like I wasn't enough. They said that they wanted her to understand that they didn't favor one of us over the other. They were equally proud of both of us, even if Chloe couldn't see that. But of course, nothing ever goes as planned. When she came home for Christmas, things didn't improve at all. Chloe's attitude had only gotten worse over the past couple of years, and this year it was unbearable. She had just come back from Japan, and knowing that I was pregnant and not as financially stable or successful as she was, she couldn't help but flaunt her accomplishments at every opportunity. It was like she was making a point to remind everyone how much better she was doing. It wasn't just her words, it was in the way she looked at me, the way she asked me if I was really happy for her. As if she knew the answer before I could even respond. I felt like I was suffocating in the room with her, trying to keep my composure, trying not to let her see how much it hurt. It wasn't about her success anymore. It was about how she was using it to make me feel small. I remember leaving that Christmas party early. It wasn't because I didn't want to be there, but because I was struggling to keep my temper in check. It was the hardest thing I had to do, to smile and pretend everything was okay when I just wanted to break down. But I held it together, at least outwardly, and made it through the night, though it felt like I was dying inside. After the party, my parents had a serious talk with Chloe, hoping they could get through to her. But she wasn't having any of it. She had become so consumed by her need to prove her superiority that she wasn't even willing to listen. She told my parents that she had worked hard for everything she had and wasn't going to stop talking about it just to make me feel better. She was proud of her success, and she believed that I needed to deal with it. There was no empathy, no understanding, just cold dismissal of how I felt. It was clear that she had no intention of backing off, no intention of letting me have even a fraction of the space I needed to feel okay about my own life. That's when I decided enough was enough. I couldn't keep allowing her to tear me down, to constantly make me feel like I was nothing compared to her. I left the family group chat, cutting ties with her once and for all. My parents understood, and they agreed that it was probably for the best. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, and during that time I had no idea what Chloe had been up to. That was until I heard, through a couple of relatives, that she was back from Japan. And this time she had a baby. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I found out about it around 4 weeks ago, and apparently it was a miracle baby, only 2 months old. My parents told me that they had been on video calls with her before she returned, but there had never been a hint that she was pregnant. She had kept it all hidden, only to reveal it as some grand surprise to everyone. Along with the announcement of her baby, she also shared that she had gotten married to the father of her child in a private ceremony just a year ago. The timing of it all felt so intentional. Everyone in the family knew that I was supposed to be getting married around the same time, but now all anyone could talk about was Chloe's marriage and her baby. The spotlight had shifted, and I felt like I was being pushed aside once again. To make matters worse, Chloe claimed her husband was still in Japan for work and couldn't make it to see her, but she had brought her daughter back so that the family could meet her. It was almost as if she had planned to overshadow everything about my wedding. She knew I was about to get married, and suddenly it was all about her. I tried not to let it bother me. I was supposed to be getting married, and that was supposed to be a special moment for me. I couldn't let her ruin that, so I continued to avoid her. But despite my best efforts, things took another turn. Chloe managed to find a way to ruin my wedding too. On the day of my wedding, Chloe showed up uninvited. It wasn't even the timing that was the worst part. It was the fact that she had snuck in. I was furious when I saw her, but I couldn't let her get to me. Ethan and my parents helped me stay calm, reminding me that if I made a scene, I would be giving her exactly what she wanted. She wanted attention, she wanted the drama, and I wasn't going to give it to her. As long as she wasn't actively causing chaos, I had to just let her stay and deal with it later. I couldn't believe it. She was ruining my wedding, making everything about her. The wedding was held at Ethan's aunt's farmhouse, and because the security wasn't tight, it was easy for her to sneak in. Looking back, I wish I had spent more money on security. It would have saved me from so much stress. But by then, it was too late. Throughout the entire time she was there, all she did was talk about her miracle baby and how lucky she was. She didn't care about my happiness. She only cared about proving how much better she was. And to make matters worse, she didn't hesitate to tell everyone she met how my children were illegitimate. Because I had them before marriage, every conversation felt like a slap in the face. I tried to smile, tried to act like it didn't bother me. But inside, I was furious. She was making my special day a nightmare, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. It was heartbreaking. At the end of the day, I was left to pick up the pieces of what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. It wasn't just Chloe's actions. It was the way she had somehow managed to infiltrate every part of my life, every moment, and turn it into something painful. But I knew that I couldn't let her win. I had my family, I had Ethan, and I had my own strength to lean on. That's what kept me going. Somehow, I managed to get through it all. At one point, I almost lost control. The stress was just too much to bear. But just before I could even speak up or react, the place was suddenly stormed by the police. My heart raced in confusion, and I had no idea what was going on. They quickly began making us seal the exits, locking us all inside within mere seconds. It was complete chaos, and my mind struggled to process what was happening. I couldn't even think straight as they moved toward Chloe and arrested her, completely throwing everything into disarray. It wasn't until much later that I learned the truth about what had been going on. A woman, who I initially assumed was connected to Chloe, was standing there screaming and crying, clutching a baby that was supposed to be my sister's. The woman was insisting the baby was hers, and the whole scene was so surreal. Everything after that felt like a blur. Statements were taken, handcuffs were clicked, and the room filled with confusion. It all felt like a dream I was struggling to wake up from, but I never did. As it turned out, the baby wasn't even a baby. The pictures Chloe had been showing us, the ones that had made us all believe she was a mother, were taken from a friend's social media account. Chloe had photoshopped herself into those images, as though she was some kind of sicko. The worst part? When she'd been meeting with us, pretending to be a proud mother, she hadn't even had her own child. She'd been babysitting for her friend, staying with her ever since she returned from Japan. She'd ended the lease on her own apartment and had been living with her friend, watching their baby for free. Chloe had never invited any of us to visit her, claiming she was too busy with her new life. But she only showed up to family events when it suited her, like on the day of my wedding. It seemed like she decided to take things even further. Chloe attended my wedding, uninvited and without my knowledge, sneaking in while everyone was focused on the ceremony. What she did was beyond anything I could have imagined. She had taken the baby without her friend's consent while her friend and husband were sleeping, and after doing so, refused to answer any calls. Her friend, realizing the situation, had no choice but to get the police involved, and they eventually arrested Chloe. The situation was beyond outrageous, but it made a certain kind of twisted sense when I thought back to all the things Chloe had said to me in the past. She'd been talking incessantly about how she wanted to ruin my wedding, to somehow take me down, and it became clear that her friends knew her well enough to figure out where she would be. They were able to track her down, leading to her eventual arrest. It was all insane. I still have a hard time understanding how it escalated to this point, and I know I'll never fully come to terms with it. Chloe had always been fiercely competitive, and while I knew she had an edge to her, I never thought it would drive her to such extreme psychotic lengths. To think that she was willing to do something so deeply unsettling, all just to prove to our parents that she was somehow better than me, was deeply disturbing. What was even more disturbing was how she was trying to spin the whole situation. Now, she was begging her friends not to press charges against her. She was trying to convince them that she wasn't in her right mind, but to me it was clear she wasn't sincere. Chloe was trying to weasel her way out of this mess she created, but it was too late. And then she blamed me for everything. According to her, I had gotten married just to rub it in her face. This was coming from the same person I hadn't spoken to in almost 2 years. The last time we interacted was during a heated exchange, and since then I had kept my distance. I had even let her crash my wedding out of courtesy, not wanting to cause a scene, and yet here she was, turning my special day into something ugly, something completely warped. If anyone had the right to be upset, it was me, but I never took that route. Then the unthinkable happened. Chloe reached out to me, telling me I needed to convince her friends not to press charges against her. She wanted me to somehow take responsibility for pushing her to this extreme behavior, to get her off the hook. She suggested that I had been tormenting her with my marriage and children, and that was what drove her to act out. It was beyond ridiculous. I told her that she belonged in prison, or better yet, in a psych ward. I couldn't even fathom how she could still be delusional enough to think I'd help her. Yet my parents seemed to think otherwise. They wanted me to help her, to convince her friends that Chloe wasn't thinking straight. They believed that if I stepped in, it would somehow save her from the consequences of her actions. But I knew better. I wasn't about to make things easier for her. She had dug her own grave, and I wasn't about to climb in there with her. My parents tried to reason with me, telling me it would be wrong to abandon her in her time of need. But I wasn't swayed. I was done with all of it. I decided to cut ties with my entire family, including my parents. Sure, they had been supportive during my pregnancy and after the birth of my kids, but now I needed space, time away from all this drama. I didn't want to get caught up in their mess anymore. I needed peace, and I couldn't find it while being constantly dragged into their turmoil. Ethan was on my side with this decision, and that made me feel even more certain that I was doing the right thing. The family dynamics had been so unhealthy for so long, and this whole Chloe situation was just the final straw. I couldn't continue trying to fix things or make peace with people who didn't understand how their actions were affecting me. As for Chloe, I didn't owe her anything, and I wasn't going to help her out of this mess. Not long after, I received word from a couple of relatives that Chloe was in serious trouble. Her friends had decided to press charges, and this time there was no way to wriggle out of it. Chloe had been claiming that she had her friends' consent to take the baby whenever she wanted, but that claim was hard to prove, especially after everything that had happened at my wedding, and how she had been parading around as if she were the mother of that child. It was hard to see a way out for her, and truthfully, I wasn't surprised. I still wasn't speaking to my parents. I had made it clear to them that I wouldn't engage with them until they acknowledged how badly they had messed things up. Not just for me, but for Chloe as well. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the larger picture, the damage that had been done to our family. Chloe was on trial now, and while we didn't know what would happen next, the possibility of her facing jail time loomed over her. It was heartbreaking to think about, but she had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. I couldn't feel sorry for her, not after everything she'd done to me and our family. Meanwhile, Ethan and I were trying to focus on our honeymoon, hoping it would provide some relief from the chaos surrounding the wedding. But things weren't easy. I couldn't ask my parents to watch our kids, and we had to rely on Ethan's parents for help. Still, we hoped that our honeymoon would be an opportunity to heal and move forward. It would just be the two of us. And for once, we wanted to feel like everything was okay, even if only for a little while.